The rain outside Clarion Heights General Hospital came down in curtains as though the skies were mourning something no one had spoken aloud. The rhythmic tapping against the windows had a hollow, almost cruel cadence, like applause for tragedy. Inside room 417B, the air was cold and sterile. But even colder were the eyes staring back at Alina Grace Hayworth. She had just brought 2 lives into the world, twin daughters, Selah, Eden. They were swaddled in soft pink hospital blankets, their newborn cries fading to shallow breaths as they rested against her chest. Damp strands of her hair clung to her forehead, her hospital gown soaked in sweat, blood, and something unspoken, grief, perhaps, or fear. Her arms trembled slightly, though not from fatigue. She turned to the man standing beside the bed, the one she had once believed would catch her when she fell. Donovan Blair Kensington IV, tall, composed, impeccably groomed even now, in a storm. Savannah's golden prince, heir to the Kensington legacy. But tonight, his polished frame held none of the warmth she'd once clung to. He stood stiffly by the window, as if he didn't belong in the frame of this picture. His gaze rested on the babies but didn't soften, didn't shift, didn't come alive. Alina swallowed hard. "They're perfect," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Donovan blinked, then gave a slow nod, not in agreement but in resignation. Silence stretched between them like glass ready to shatter. And then the door opened. A gust of cold air swept into the room, followed by the sound of stilettos on tile. Miranda Kensington entered, her perfume sharp and clinical, her chin held high with generational disdain. At her side walked Cyrus, Donovan's younger brother, carrying an iPad and wearing a smirk that always made Alina feel like she was being measured and found lacking. Miranda's tailored coat was dry despite the weather, her expression even drier. She stood at the foot of the bed like a monarch inspecting peasants. "2 girls?" she asked, her lips barely moving. Alina instinctively held her daughters tighter. "Yes, Selah and Eden." Miranda gave a clipped nod, then turned toward her son. "They favor her side," she said, eyes narrowed. "I suppose Donovan's features weren't strong enough to override hers." Donovan remained still, hands in his pockets, as if disengaging was easier than disagreeing. Alina's throat tightened. She had imagined this moment, her babies born into love, celebration, and family unity. But in this room there was only silence and the quiet hum of medical machines. "I thought you'd be happy," she managed. Miranda arched an eyebrow. "Donovan married you against my advice. I did not expect happiness to follow." Alina flinched. "Is there something you need, Miranda?" she asked, trying to remain civil. "Yes, competence." Miranda walked to the whiteboard and erased Alina's handwriting, welcomed Selah and Eden, replacing it with the initials KE for Kensington Estates. "Let's be clear. These children are Kensingtons. We'll arrange nannies, professional staff. You'll recover, but you'll not interfere with the raising of heirs." "Heirs?" Alina echoed. "They're babies. Their legacy," Miranda corrected. "And legacy must be groomed," Cyrus chimed in. "We'll bring in legal counsel next week to formalize things." "Formalize what?" Alina asked. "The structure," Miranda said coolly. "Custody parameters, prenuptial enforcements, resource allocation." Donovan didn't flinch. He just looked out the window. Alina's voice cracked. "Donovan?" He turned halfway, finally making eye contact. "I think you should rest," he said. "But we'll talk later." No kiss on the forehead, no touch, no congratulations, just cold air and disappearing footsteps as they left her with 2 newborns and a heart quickly learning how to break again. The next morning, Donovan didn't show, neither did Miranda. Alina was discharged 2 days later into a Kensington-owned car with a Kensington-hired nurse. When she arrived back at the estate, everything felt rearranged, distant, sanitized. The nursery she'd painted pale lavender was now white and gold. The lullaby playlist she'd made was replaced with classical piano. And Miranda was there, everywhere, overseeing the nannies, rewriting schedules, reorganizing what Alina had prepared with care into something that looked more like a corporate acquisition than a homecoming. Alina would wake to the scent of bourbon on crumpled suits, lipstick stains on ties, and once, a citrus-scented scarf she had never worn, stuffed in the backseat of their car. Then the whisper campaign began. First, the staff grew quieter when she entered rooms. Then came Miranda's subtle jabs. "It must be hard staying faithful when you've given up your figure." Or, "Poor Donovan." Some men just aren't built to handle constant crying. From wives or infants, Alina tried to fight back. She offered proof. Baby monitor logs, nanny reports, sleepless diaries. But the more she explained, the more they twisted her words into desperation. A dangly earring, gold, cheap, nothing Alina would wear. And the scarf, the same one she'd found weeks ago. "She's been cheating," Miranda said, presenting them like exhibits. Donovan didn't ask where they came from, didn't even raise an eyebrow. He just stared at Alina with something close to disgust. "I've been here," Alina said, voice trembling, "with our daughters, every day, every night." "She's not Kensington material," Miranda snapped. "Get out," Donovan said quietly. Alina blinked. "What? I want you gone. The babies. Stay. No, Donovan, you can't just. You don't get to choose anymore." Cyrus stepped forward and handed her a legal-looking document. It was filled with jargon, half of it incorrect, most of it unenforceable. But in her postpartum haze, terrified, humiliated, emotionally raw, it looked official. Alina was stripped of everything. She left in a rain-soaked hoodie, carrying 2 newborns, a half-zip diaper bag, and $27. The gates of the Kensington estate didn't close behind her gently. They slammed. Later that night, in a neon-lit 24-hour diner on Pine and Rosemont, Alina sat alone in the corner booth. Seela and Eden were nestled against her chest, wrapped in the hospital blankets she had refused to leave behind. Their tiny mouths moved softly as they dreamed, unaware that the world had just tried to break their mother. The waitress gave her a free cup of tea. She hadn't even asked. She just looked like someone who needed warmth. Alina's reflection in the window was unfamiliar, hollow-eyed, pale. Her shoulders drooped, her lips cracked, but her arms held steady as she cradled her girls, as if motherhood had made her unbreakable in all the places where womanhood had once failed her. And then her thoughts drifted to a different life, a different name. Emerson Hale. He had asked her to marry him under a grapevine canopy in Santa Barbara. His hands had shaken as he held the ring, modest but beautiful. She had loved him then, desperately, deeply. But he was always on a plane, always in meetings, always building, and she was afraid of being a footnote in someone else's empire. So she left him, chose Donovan, the stable heir, and destroyed everything. She never told Emerson she was pregnant, never told him she kept the necklace he gave her tucked in a sock drawer. She didn't know if he remembered her, didn't know if he hated her, didn't know that he had never stopped searching. Alina Grace hadn't stopped bleeding, not physically, not emotionally. Her body was healing in silence, but her spirit screamed with every second spent inside the Kensington mansion. It wasn't home, not anymore, if it ever was. Seela and Eden, barely a month old, were her only anchors. She moved like a mother and a ghost at once, waking for 3 a.m., feedings, humming lullabies in the absence of affection, and watching her husband slip further into shadows she could no longer reach. Donovan had become a stranger. The man who once memorized her cravings during pregnancy now avoided even casual eye contact. He left before sunrise and came home long past midnight, often carrying the faint scent of champagne and other people's secrets. Sometimes Alina found lipstick stains on his shirts, not hers. Other times she found receipts for hotel rooms not booked in her name. She tried to confront him once. He just stepped out of the shower, towel slung around his waist, steam clinging to his skin. She stood in the doorway, holding a receipt with trembling fingers. This isn't business, Donovan." He didn't bother arguing, just dried his face and said flatly, "You're paranoid. You don't even try to lie anymore," she whispered. He looked up then, blank eyes, tired jaw. "I don't have to." The days grew crueler. Miranda Kensington seemed to exist now solely to dismantle Alina's sanity. She redecorated the nursery without asking, replacing the pastel dreamscape Alina designed with rigid symmetry and sharp decor. Books Alina had bought on motherhood vanished. Medical supplies she carefully labeled were reordered and redistributed by strangers. When Alina asked Miranda to stop interfering, Miranda replied with chilling calm, "You may have given birth, dear, but don't confuse that with ownership. These children belong to legacy now." Cyrus, ever the smirking puppet, began frequenting the house under the pretense of legal oversight. You know, he'd say during visits, "This estate has reputations to protect. It's not just about raising children. It's about managing optics." "Optics?" Alina snapped. "I'm a wife and mother, not a scandal." He chuckled. "That depends on who's telling the story." And then came the shift. It started with whispers. The housekeeper paused conversations when Alina entered a room. The gardener didn't greet her anymore. The family's chef, once warm, stopped taking her dinner requests. Everyone looked at her differently, as if her presence had become an inconvenience, a stain on silk. One night, while clearing the laundry basket, she found a citrus-scented scarf under Donovan's side of the bed. A brand she didn't wear, a scent she didn't use, and in the living room cabinet, a single gold earring, thin and unfamiliar. Her stomach dropped. She wanted to believe she was wrong, that maybe someone else misplaced them. But deep inside she knew. She wasn't the one under suspicion. She was being framed. 3 days later, the trap was sprung. Miranda arrived unannounced, followed by Cyrus, who carried a small locked box like it held sacred evidence. Donovan was already home, a rare occasion, and seated stiffly on the living room couch. Seela and Eden were sleeping upstairs. The air downstairs was dense, waiting. Miranda motioned to the box. Cyrus opened it dramatically and produced the scarf and the earring, placing them neatly on the glass coffee table in front of Donovan. "Do these belong to you, Alina?" Miranda asked in a clipped voice. Alina's heart pounded. "No." "Are you sure?" Miranda said, tilting her head. "We found them under your husband's bed and in your jewelry drawer." "My drawer?" she gasped. Cyrus nodded. House staff reported strange activity, inconsistencies. "We decided to check." Donovan leaned forward. "Just tell me the truth." "I am telling you the truth," she cried. "This is a setup, your mother's setup." Miranda didn't flinch. "You're unraveling. I just gave birth," Alina screamed. "Of course I'm unraveling. I've been breastfeeding 2 infants on 3 hours of sleep while being erased in my own home." Donovan stood. "I want you out." The words hit harder than any slap. "No. No, you don't mean that," she whispered. He didn't shout. He didn't even raise his voice. But what he said next was colder than ice. "You've embarrassed this family. I'm giving you until tomorrow. The babies are mine. They stay, over my dead. You don't get to choose anymore." That night, Alina sat on the nursery floor, holding both girls and crying so silently it left burns in her throat. She tried to call her mother. No answer. She texted a friend from college. No reply. No one came. The next morning, as the household pretended everything was normal, Miranda arrived with what she called a resolution document. Cyrus smiled like a prosecutor. "This won't hold in court," Alina muttered, scanning the absurd document. It was filled with inaccurate legal terms, vague accusations, and blanks where signatures should be. "It doesn't have to hold in court," Cyrus said. "It just has to look scary enough to push you out." Alina looked up, tears blurring her vision. "And if I don't leave?" Miranda shrugged. "We'll make life very inconvenient." Alina had no money, no access to shared accounts, no car keys. They'd taken everything, except her children. "Can I take them?" "No, I won't leave them. Then you'll force us to involve security." For the first time in her life, Alina understood what powerlessness truly felt like. It wasn't rage. It was quiet. It was suffocating. She packed 1 diaper bag, 2 bottles, a few wipes, the hospital-issued birth certificates, a baby carrier she bought secondhand while pregnant. Donovan didn't even come downstairs. As she reached for the front doorknob, Cyrus handed her a folded note. "Legal proceedings begin next week. Don't disappear. It won't look good for you." The sun was out, but everything felt colder than the storm that brought them into the world. She didn't get far. Her feet blistered in borrowed shoes as she walked 6 blocks to a downtown bus terminal. She sat on the bench, clutching her babies and ignoring the stares of strangers. A kind woman with a red scarf handed her $5. A man with a baby of his own offered a half-empty formula can. When the bus came, Alina hesitated. Where could she go? She had no plan, no job, no home, and every hotel required identification she no longer had access to. She eventually found a diner, open 24 hours. The sign blinked like it was gasping for breath. She stepped inside with the last bit of dignity she had left. The booth near the window welcomed her, and for the first time in weeks she breathed. Seela stirred first, then Eden. She hummed an old lullaby, half-remembered, barely audible. The waitress gave her warm water, not asking for payment. Alina took it with a nod of gratitude, and in the dim reflection of the diner glass, she didn't see a failure. She saw a survivor, but her heart still ached. Not for Donovan, not for the Kensington name, but for a choice she had made 5 years ago, a man she left, and the question that haunted her now, what if he would have fought for her, even in the storm? Alina hadn't touched the tea. It sat in front of her like a reminder that kindness still existed in small doses, even when life no longer did. The dim, buzzing overhead lights inside the diner didn't soften her fatigue, nor did the plastic-wrapped condiments and flickering jukebox tunes. The twins slept in their stroller beside her, tucked beneath a tattered fleece blanket she'd found on the bus. And still, somewhere deep beneath her exhaustion, something stirred, a memory, a man. Emerson Hale. It had been 5 years since she'd seen him. 5 years since she walked away from the only man who ever looked at her like she wasn't a convenience, but a choice. A promise. She remembered the vineyard outside Santa Barbara. Wind dancing through the grapevines, her white sundress, his blue button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, eyes glowing with wild, unfiltered devotion. He had proposed under a wooden arch covered in trailing roses, voice cracking, when he asked if she could imagine a forever beside him. But she said no. And not because she didn't love him, because she was afraid. Afraid he was too busy, too ambitious, too driven to ever truly make space for a family. He traveled every other week, took calls during dinners, slept with his laptop beside the bed, and Alina, soft, quiet Alina, wanted something stable. So she chose Donovan, the man who offered her comfort, a legacy name, and a mansion filled with staff and structure. A man who had once brought her breakfast in bed and whispered promises beneath candlelight, only to later accuse her of betrayal with forged earrings and stranger's perfume. Now, sitting in a roadside diner with nothing but her babies and a shredded version of herself, Alina realized she had traded fire for frost. Her fingers unconsciously reached for the tiny chain around her neck. The pendant was a soft silver circle with a hand-engraved E. Emerson had given it to her the night before she left, not knowing it would be their last. She'd meant to return it, but she never could. Through 2 years of marriage, through pregnancy, through pain, she kept it hidden in a sock drawer, then later around her neck, buried under layers of obligation. She stared at it now, throat tight. "I didn't even tell you," she whispered aloud, as if Emerson were seated across from her. "I was pregnant. I found out the week after I walked away. You called. I didn't pick up." Tears slid silently down her cheeks. "I thought you didn't want kids. I thought you'd leave if you knew." The waitress returned quietly, refilled the mug, and left again. Alina didn't notice. She was lost in that vineyard memory, his trembling hands, his voice asking, "You'd tell me if something ever changed between us, right?" She had nodded then. She had lied. What she didn't know, what no one in that diner could possibly guess, was that 5 states away, Emerson Hale had never stopped looking. Not really. He told himself it had ended. He dated other women, focused on his startup, became the golden boy of Manhattan's tech scene, but none of it ever felt complete, not without her. Her laugh had ruined other women's voices for him. Her quiet confidence had made other brilliance feel staged. Her memory never faded. It only grew louder with every milestone she didn't witness. When he made his first billion, he imagined calling her. When he donated to children's charities, he imagined her by his side. When he built his dream penthouse, it felt colder than any studio apartment they once shared takeout in. So he started looking. Quietly, relentlessly, no police, no headlines, no press. He hired private investigators with discreet contracts, sent out quiet inquiries in Savannah and California, tracked Social Security records, birth certificates, marriage licenses. Every few months, they reported nothing. Until one morning, Phoenix Varelli, his childhood friend and now coup, walked into his office holding a yellow file and said, "You might want to sit down." In a sleek tower on the Upper West Side, Emerson stood at the edge of his floor-to-ceiling windows, staring down at the city's pulse far below. The file was open on his desk behind him. Inside it, a photo. It was grainy and slightly bent. Alina, hair tied in a loose bun, no makeup, a smudge of flour on her cheek, wearing a waitress uniform and looking sideways as if distracted by a child calling her name. Behind her, in a stroller, 2 tiny girls, twins. The note attached read, "Name, Alina Grace location, Savannah outskirts employment, Sagewood Bistro dependent children. 2, age 3 no listed spouse or cohabitant." The world stopped moving. He gripped the glass railing tighter. 3 years, twins. Could they be? Phoenix entered behind him. She changed her name after the marriage dissolved. We pulled DMV records, no signs of domestic charges, but I had our legal team look into the Kensingtons. Messy family, big money. And get this, her ex-husband is on the board of a family-controlled trust, but Alina's name was wiped from everything last year. Emerson turned, voice low. You said twins? Phoenix nodded. Green eyes, man. One of them has green eyes. His heart thudded in his chest. Get the jet ready. Already did. Tell no one. No press. No partners. No updates to the team. Phoenix raised an eyebrow. This isn't business anymore, is it? No, Emerson said, grabbing his coat. It never was. 2 days later, he stood outside Sagewood Bistro, heart racing. He watched through the window. There she was, older, thinner, but more beautiful than he remembered, like time had refined her, not worn her down. She moved with gentle rhythm, wiping a table, adjusting her apron, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His chest clenched. And then he saw them, Selah and Eden. One was doodling with crayons in the corner booth. The other was holding a ragged bunny plush and sipping chocolate milk from a bendy straw. Emerson took a step back. They were so small, so real. One of them looked just like Alina. The other had green eyes. His knees nearly gave out. I'm not ready, he murmured. But ready didn't matter anymore. He pushed the door open. The bell above it rang. Alina looked up, and the plate she was drying slipped from her hands and shattered on the tile. Her eyes widened. He hadn't changed much, still tailored, still composed, still devastating. Her fingers gripped the counter as if anchoring herself to gravity. No, she whispered. He took a step forward. She turned and bolted through the kitchen, apron flying, pushing open the back exit, but he followed. The alley behind the bistro smelled like day-old grease and rain. Alina, he called. She froze, then turned. Her voice cracked. You can't be here. I've been trying to find you for 3 years. You found me, she said bitterly. Congratulations. He stepped closer gently. Are they mine? She looked away. Selah, Eden. They're Donovan's, she lied. His face didn't move, but his eyes did. They blinked once, slowly. I don't care whose they are, he said softly. I care that you're safe. She choked on a breath, and for the first time in a long time, Alina Grace didn't know what to say. Emerson Hale had built empires, one app, one deal, one sleepless night at a time. He was the kind of man who once negotiated licensing rights on 3 hours of sleep and secured a $40 million seed round with his shirt half tucked. People called him brilliant, ruthless, visionary. Investors worshipped his instincts. News outlets chased his name. Forbes featured him more than once, highlighting his youth, net worth, and philanthropic ventures. But behind the prestige, behind the lavish penthouse and curated speeches, lay a hunger that no portfolio could fill. Alina. The day she walked away, she didn't leave quietly. She left a dent, a lingering silence in rooms where her laughter once echoed, an emptiness in every celebration she didn't witness. Her absence became his most loyal companion. Emerson didn't beg her to stay. He was younger then, proud, ambitious, naive. He thought love alone could wait while he conquered the world. He was wrong. She had written a note, just one line. You deserve someone who doesn't feel like second place. At the time, he didn't understand. Now, 5 years later, it was the only sentence that made sense. He kept a box, hidden beneath the floor panel of his walk-in closet. Inside, a photo of them on the Santa Barbara beach, a pressed flower from the vineyard where he proposed, and the velvet ring box, still sealed. He never opened it again after she left, not until Phoenix brought news from Savannah, and suddenly, the box was back in his hands. After the alleyway encounter outside the bistro, Emerson returned to his hotel without touching his drink or answering his phone. He stared at the ceiling, haunted by her voice, her bitterness, the pain she carried like a second skin. She had lied. He knew it. The twins were 3 years old. She had broken up with him 4 years ago. The math didn't lie. But he also understood something else, something deeper. She hadn't told the truth because she didn't trust him to carry it. Not then. Maybe not even now. The next morning, Emerson didn't try to see her again. Instead, he sent Phoenix. Phoenix had always been the better bridge, charming, sharp, disarming in a way Emerson could never be. He walked into the bistro carrying a bouquet of soft white lilies, a box of organic baby essentials, and a thick manila folder marked Hartwell Foundation. He waited until Alina stepped outside for her lunch break, her hair tied in a frizzy bun. eyes puffy from a night of overthinking. "Hi," Phoenix said gently. "I'm not here to make you uncomfortable." She narrowed her eyes. "You're with him? I'm his friend, his business partner, but I'm here for you." She hesitated. "I don't want anything from him." "Good," Phoenix nodded, "because what I brought isn't from him." He handed her the Hartwell folder. It was a non-profit, founded by Emerson but legally separate. Its mission: provide housing, health care, legal support, and child care resources to single mothers and displaced women. Everything in the packet was clean, legal, and free from Emerson's name. No branding, no strings. "I don't need pity," Alina said quietly. "This pity," Phoenix replied. "This is restoration." She hesitated again, then said nothing, but she took the folder. That night, Sela developed a fever. The free clinic had closed. She had no car, no insurance, no help. When Sela vomited onto her chest, Alina didn't even flinch. She just held her tighter. Then she reached for the folder. The number was on the first page. She called. By morning, she had a doctor. By afternoon, she had antibiotics, formula, and a ride. By evening, she had a place to stay. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't marble and chandeliers, but it was clean. A guest cottage on the outskirts of a private estate. 2 bedrooms, a stocked fridge, children's books on the shelves. The walls smelled like lavender and fresh paint. The windows opened to wildflowers and wind. And Alina, for the first time in months, exhaled. She didn't see Emerson for a week, not once. But his presence echoed. The groceries that arrived every 3 days. The heater that turned on at 6 p.m. sharp. The children's bedtime books, titles she once mentioned loving in passing. And slowly, life began to heal. She took walks with the twins down the gravel path, cooked her own meals, slept without fear, even laughed once when Sela put spaghetti in her hair and Eden called her Mama Monster. But the moment everything changed, truly changed, was when the twins met him. They had wandered outside one afternoon. The sun was warm, the grass was dry. Not the twins, his. She rushed out. There they were, Sela on Emerson's lap holding a dandelion, Eden in the grass beside him trying to pull his tie. He looked up, caught her in his gaze. He didn't speak. He just smiled. Not the confident kind, the kind that asked for permission. Alina stared at them, this perfect, unreal triangle of light and tenderness, and didn't speak either, because something inside her had already said yes. From then on, the twins called him Mr. E. They waited for him after daycare, showed him their coloring books, asked him to read the same bedtime story again and again. He never missed a night. And Alina, she let him in. Not all at once. She let him make dinner once. Then coffee. Then Sunday pancakes. Then stories about his childhood. Then his confession, "I've never stopped thinking about you." But the next morning she left coffee for him on the porch. One evening, as he carried a sleepy Sela upstairs, Eden tugged at his pant leg. "Do you love our mommy?" He paused, looked down, then smiled. "I never stopped." Alina heard it. She was behind the door. And for the first time in years, her tears felt like hope, not pain. Sagewood Bistro hadn't changed in the 3 weeks since Emerson first stepped inside. But Alina had. The scars were still fresh, yes, but her backbone, once trembling under Donovan's dominance, had hardened. She carried herself with more grace now, even in an apron. Her laugh, though not as free, was no longer hidden beneath fear. She still avoided the mirror, but she no longer flinched when she saw herself. Sela and Eden were growing stronger. Their cheeks had color again. Their giggles returned. And so had her sense of self, quietly, slowly, like spring creeping back into the cold. But no amount of recovery could prepare her for what would happen next. It was a Thursday. Lunch rush had ended. Alina stood behind the counter, bent over a pile of receipts, hair tied back in a rushed twist. Her apron was damp with tomato bisque from a toddler's overturned bowl, and she was trying not to yawn when the chime above the front door rang. She looked up, expecting a regular. Instead, she saw him, Emerson, not on the cottage porch, not reading bedtime stories, but here, in her space, in a crisp navy suit that looked unfairly perfect on him. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't tense either. He was simply present, composed, unmoving, and for 5 full seconds neither of them breathed. Then, crash. The plate in her hand slipped, shattering on the floor. Everyone turned. Alina didn't notice. Her eyes locked onto Emerson's like magnets she never knew were still charged. Then she turned and walked. No, ran, straight through the kitchen and out the back door, apron flying behind her like a flag of surrender. He followed. He had to. The alley was narrow and still slick from morning rain. A single garbage bin leaned against the brick wall, steaming under the midday sun. Alina stood with her back to him, arms folded tight over her chest. She didn't turn when he said her name. "Alina, don't—" Her voice trembled. "Don't say my name like it means something." He stopped a few feet behind her. "I'm sorry for coming here." "No, you're not," he exhaled. "You're right." Finally, she turned. Her face wasn't angry, it was tired. Eyes glossy, not from pain, but from years of holding it all in. "You've already done enough," she whispered. "You found me. You offered help. You let them call you Mr. E. So why are you still here?" His voice was quiet. "Because I couldn't walk away twice." She blinked. "This isn't your burden. It's not a burden. It's a chance. To fix something? To hold something I never should have let go of." Silence. The kind that isn't empty but full of questions too fragile to say aloud. She looked down. "I told you they're not yours." "I know you lied." Her eyes snapped up. He didn't say it with accusation. He said it with understanding. "The dates line up. Eden has my eyes. Green eyes run in my family. They run in mine too." She looked away again. And then, "I lied because I didn't want to shatter the life you rebuilt. I thought maybe you had someone. I thought maybe you wouldn't want them." His reply was immediate. "There hasn't been anyone." She inhaled slowly, her voice softer. "They were born in pain. I didn't want that to touch you. You are their beginning, Alina, and I don't care how it started. I only care about where we go from here." She stepped back. He didn't follow. "I'm not who I was," she said quietly. "I'm not soft anymore. I never wanted soft. I wanted you." She bit her lip, then suddenly laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Do you know what it's like to wake up and have your own children used against you? To be told you're nothing? That your value is tied to the last name you carry?" His jaw clenched. "Then let me give you mine." She froze, not because it was a proposal, because it wasn't, not yet. It was a promise, a path, an invitation back to something she thought she'd lost. "Don't fix me, Emerson." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "You have no idea how broken I still feel." He stepped closer slowly. "I don't need you to be whole. I just need you to let me be near you while you heal." And then softly, he added, and didn't run. She didn't doubt. She just stood at the doorway watching them sleep, and whispered, "He still loves us." The moonlight spilled in through the window, and for the first time since leaving the Kensington estate, Alina felt like she could finally begin again, not as a woman discarded, but as a woman rediscovered. The rescue didn't come with a grand gesture. There was no limousine, no press, no display of status. Just a cottage on the edge of someone else's estate, and 2 daughters whose coughs softened day by day. The path to healing never feels like a rescue. It feels like peace returning slowly, like the creak of a house settling into the earth after a long winter. And that's what Emerson Hale gave her. Not charity, not pity, just peace. Alina woke up that Monday to birdsong and quiet. No nanny cam, no intercom announcements. No polished hallway steps tracking her movement. Just the sound of Eden's sleepy hum and Selah's snore like puffs. There was warm sunlight through the curtain. A folded note on the counter in Phoenix's handwriting. "Breakfast is on the porch. You deserve one good start." She stepped out barefoot and found 2 covered trays. One held a hot cup of tea, ginger and honey, just how she liked it. The other, a stack of fluffy pancakes cut into heart shapes. She laughed before she could stop herself. Not because it was funny, but because it felt like someone remembered her. She didn't see Emerson that morning, or the next. Instead, Phoenix stopped by, carrying groceries, a file folder, and a bouquet of fresh lavender. "Don't say anything," he told her, holding up a hand. "Let me just get through the pitch before you shut the door on me again." Alina folded her arms. "This better not be about donors or debt. It's about structure," he replied smoothly, "and protection, for you." For the girls, the folder bore the Hartwell logo again. But this time, the contents were different. A scholarship program, fully funded, for both twins through elementary school, a medical care trust in their name, and a personal living stipend labeled Independent Recovery Grant, all anonymous, no branding, no loopholes, no Emerson signature. Phoenix smiled. Think of it as a parachute, no strings, just cushion. Alina looked at the numbers, then up at Phoenix. Why are you doing this? We're not, he said. You are. We're just stepping out of your way. That night, Alina stood at the door as Emerson pulled into the gravel driveway. She watched him step out of the car, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, a single brown paper bag in one hand. I brought curry, he said, lifting the bag like a peace offering. It's how I say sorry without being annoying. She smiled and opened the door wider. That night, after the girls were asleep, they sat on the porch and ate with plastic forks. The stars were out, the silence between them was lighter, and when he reached over to wipe sauce off her cheek with his thumb, she didn't flinch. By the end of the week, the twins had given him a new title. They stopped calling him Mr. E. Now it was Emmy. It stuck. Emmy, look, Eden called one morning, running toward him with her drawing. He bent down, kneeling beside her. She held up the paper. 2 girls, a house, a tall man holding their hands. Who's that? Emerson asked, pointing to the figure. You, she grinned. He swallowed hard. And who am I to you? Home, she whispered. Alina overheard it. And when Emerson turned to see if she'd heard too, she didn't speak. She just nodded and walked back into the house. But that night, she left a second pillow on the couch and an extra blanket. Days turned into weeks. The twins thrived. Eden stopped waking up at night. Selah started dancing when music played. Alina took on more shifts at the bistro, but now she came home smiling. Every time Emerson visited, they talked longer. He told her about business, about loss, about nights he couldn't sleep because he didn't know where she was. She told him about postpartum pain, the loneliness of sleeping next to a man who wouldn't touch her, and the way Selah clung to her shirt the night they were thrown out. They didn't kiss, not yet, but their silences said things that mouths couldn't. Then came the question, not from him, from Selah. Do you love Mommy? Alina had just stepped into the hallway when she heard it. She paused, listened. Emerson didn't hesitate. I do. Then why don't you kiss her like in the movies? He laughed softly. Because love waits. Waiting is boring. Sometimes, he said gently, it's necessary. That night, Alina sat beside him on the porch. Same curry, same tea. And when she leaned her head on his shoulder, she whispered, I'm not scared of the past anymore. He placed his hand over hers. I am, he replied, but I'll walk through it if you're beside me. The warning came through a text message. Phoenix read it first. Kensington Legal Counsel filing emergency custody appeal. Immediate action requested. Emerson's jaw clenched the moment he saw it. Of course they did, he muttered. The Kensingtons had been quiet too long, and silence when it came from them was never surrender. 2 days later, a uniformed courier arrived at the cottage with a formal packet. Inside, a custody claim, filed by Donovan Blair Kensington IV. The papers called Alina unstable, negligent, and potentially harmful to minor children. They reference no actual incidents, just carefully planted narratives, school absence records, fabricated witness statements, even a signature from a neighbor who had never once spoken to her. The goal wasn't truth. It was intimidation, and for a moment, it worked. Alina sat frozen at the table, paper trembling in her hands, eyes wide with quiet dread. I can't fight them, she said finally. They have the name, the money, the court. Emerson leaned forward. They don't have the truth. And that's enough? He didn't answer with words. He picked up his phone. Phoenix, activate everything. It's time. The next few days were a blur of strategy, subpoenas, and reconstruction. Emerson's legal team moved like a precision strike force, discreet and relentless. They dug through archived estate financials, backdoor charity transactions, and Donovan's firm's expense logs. Then came the breakthrough, a digital recording, Donovan's voice, recorded by Cyrus during a private phone call 2 years ago. Just plant the scarf in the damn earring, Mom. She's too sleep-deprived to fight back. Miranda's voice followed. One scandal and she'll be history. No woman who gives birth in a milk-stained robe deserves the Kensington name. It was more than enough. But Emerson didn't stop there. They subpoenaed the housekeeper. She cried on the stand. I was told if I didn't lie, I'd lose my job, but Miss Alina never stepped outside that house except with the twins. They brought in the pediatric nurse, who testified to Alina's care record during the girl's infancy, and then, finally, Alina herself. The courtroom was full the morning of her testimony. Miranda wore a navy suit, face blank. Donovan sat beside her, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Alina walked in wearing a plain gray dress, no jewelry, no makeup, just truth in her spine and the quiet strength of a woman who had survived fire and refused to be ash. The judge asked her to begin. "I didn't fight back at first," she said, "because I didn't believe I could win." She glanced at Miranda. "I was told I didn't belong, that my love wasn't enough, that my babies would be better without me." She turned to the judge again. "But I stayed. Through fever, fear, and nights I held both my daughters in my lap because I was scared to fall asleep. I stayed because love is enough." She looked toward the gallery, where Selah and Eden sat drawing quietly beside Phoenix. "I don't want revenge," she said. "I want peace. For them, for me, for whatever version of tomorrow they choose." When the judge asked if she had been coerced into signing the original separation document, she simply handed over the fake custody papers Cyrus had once shoved into her hands. It had been torn in one corner, coffee-stained, and void of any witness or legal authorization. A legal joke, except it had once held power because fear gives anything fangs. The judge stared at the page for a long moment, then spoke. "This document is invalid. This filing is manipulative. Custody remains with Miss Grace, full, immediate, uninterrupted." Miranda gasped. Donovan swore under his breath. The courtroom buzzed. But Alina didn't cry. She just closed her eyes and exhaled. That night, Emerson didn't celebrate. He didn't take her to dinner, didn't pop champagne. He sat beside her on the porch as Selah and Eden giggled in the garden under soft lantern light. Alina held a warm mug in her hands. "I'm not sure what to do now," she admitted. "You already did it," Emerson replied. She turned to him. "What if they come back? Then we fight again and again?" "As many times as it takes." They sat in silence a little while longer. Then she leaned her head on his shoulder. "I want to believe it's over," she whispered. He wrapped his arm around her. "It's not over," he said. "But now, you get to write the next chapter." The courtroom was behind them. So were the whispers, the threats, and the glances that once made Alina feel like she didn't belong anywhere. For the first time in a very long time, she belonged to herself. But that night on the porch, something still lingered in her chest, an ache soft but sharp. Not fear, not even regret. Just unfinished truth, the kind you carry long after the danger is gone. The cottage was quiet. Selah had fallen asleep with a crayon still in her hand. Eden clutched Emerson's tie like a blanket and wouldn't let go until he gently slipped it from her grasp and tucked her in. Alina waited outside. The stars were scattered wide, and the air was cool enough for a sweater. She wore one of his. When Emerson stepped onto the porch, she didn't look up, just scooted to the side and patted the cushion next to her. He sat down without a word. A minute passed, then two, and then she said softly, "I lied to protect them." He didn't interrupt. "I told you they weren't yours because I was afraid you'd walk away." "Alina." She shook her head. "No, let me finish. I've played this moment in my head so many times I feel like I've rehearsed it. And still it doesn't get easier." He waited. She took a breath. "When I found out I was pregnant, we'd already broken up. You were in Tokyo for that conference. You had just closed that deal with the Singapore firm. I saw your face on Forbes's front page 2 days later. And I knew I couldn't call you. You could have. I thought you didn't want kids. Not then. Not with your schedule. And I didn't want to trap you into something that might cost you everything." She looked down at her hands. "I kept waiting for the right time to tell you. But then I met Donovan. He was predictable, safe, and he said all the right things until he didn't." Her voice cracked. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I told myself I was giving the girls stability, a name, a future, but I was wrong." She finally looked up, and in her eyes, he didn't see guilt. He saw courage. "They're yours, Emerson. Selah and Eden. They're your daughters." He didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then he leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his fingers laced together. "I knew," he said. She blinked. "The moment I saw them, I knew. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I could see how hard you were trying to protect them, and I didn't want to be another man who made choices for you." Tears welled in her eyes. "But they deserve to know. They will," he said gently. "But not because I demand it. Because you choose to give them that part of their story." She looked away, ashamed. "They call you Emmy now." He smiled. "And it's the best name I've ever been given." He reached out and took her hand, not with urgency, with presents. And just so you know, he added, you didn't trap me. You gave me the only thing I've ever truly wanted. She swallowed hard. And what's that? A reason to stay. The proposal didn't happen in a ballroom. There was no audience, no camera flashes, no string quartet. It happened on a lawn that needed mowing, beside cardboard castles painted in purple and sky blue, and two girls in mismatched socks chasing butterflies under a soft Georgia sun. Alina stood barefoot in the grass, watching Selah and Eden shriek with joy. Their laughter rose like music. For the first time in years, it wasn't followed by a crash, a demand, or a consequence. Just laughter. Emerson stepped outside with a tray, 2 lemonades for the twins, tea for Alina, and a small velvet box hidden beneath a folded napkin. She caught his eye, and he smiled. She smiled back. Nothing needed to be said. They knew. He waited until the girls were painting their cardboard kingdom, Selah carefully dabbing red on the roof, Eden smearing glitter glue over a drawn stick figure with what she called magical hair. Then he walked over to Alina. No speech, no kneeling, just stood beside her, still holding the tray. She turned to him, and her brows arched as she saw the small box. Really, she said, smiling through it. Not what you think. Isn't that a ring box? It is, but you're not proposing? I am, Alina laughed. Then what do you mean? He placed the tray down, lifted the box, and opened it. Inside was a ring, but not just any ring. The band was designed like a crown, delicate, understated, but unmistakably regal. I designed this a year ago, he said, before I even found you again. I didn't know if I'd ever give it to you, but I knew that if the chance came, I'd do it quietly, and I'd do it with this. She looked down at it, eyes watering instantly. I don't need forever promises or big shows, he continued. I don't want you because of Selah and Eden. I want you because of you. Because even when you were lost, you led those girls through the storm with your bare hands and an unshaken heart. She whispered, I don't feel unshaken. Doesn't matter, he said. You're still standing. That's enough. He paused, voice lower now. I want to be the man you and our daughters can count on. Every day, even the boring ones, especially the boring ones. She stared at him, and then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, Yes, yay, Selah shouted from across the lawn. Both girls dropped their paintbrushes and ran full speed toward them, faces covered in color, arms wide. Is he our daddy now? Selah squealed. Like, for real, Eden added. Alina laughed through her tears. For real. Emerson crouched down just in time for them to barrel into his arms. He held them tightly, breathing in the weight and wonder of something he had wanted for far too long. I told you Emmy was ours, Eden said smugly. Selah beamed. Now we have a castle and a daddy. Alina stood over them, hand over her heart, as if steadying it from the rush of everything she once thought she lost. That evening, the ring glittered softly on her finger under the porch light. No announcement was made. No one else needed to know. But inside the walls of that cottage, with teacups still warm on the kitchen counter and crayon marks on the floor, a family had already begun. Not with a wedding, but with a promise. They didn't send out invitations. There was no registry, no designer showcase, no 6-tier cake with gold foil accents. Instead, the wedding took place beneath a canopy of mossy oaks, the kind that seemed to carry time in their branches. The sky overhead was clear, kissed with late spring sunlight, and the air smelled faintly of roses, freshly trimmed grass, and jasmine drifting from nearby hedges. The chairs were mismatched. The music came from a single violinist Alina had met at the diner. The aisle was a soft trail of wildflowers collected by Selah and Eden themselves, and that was exactly how she wanted it. Simple, true, chosen. Emerson stood at the front in a slate-gray suit, no tie, no pretense, his hands folded calmly, but his eyes searching the path as if counting each second before he'd see her. Phoenix stood to the side, officiating with a small smile and a script he'd scribbled onto the back of a napkin. Alina's sister, Lydia, flew in from Oregon and held Selah's hand as they waited in the wings. Eden twirled in a white dress covered in tiny blue stars, barefoot and giddy with excitement. Do you think Mommy will cry? She whispered. I think Emmy will cry first, Selah answered. They were both right. When Alina finally stepped onto the path, the world didn't blur. It sharpened. She wore a gown she'd helped design herself, a soft ivory silhouette that hugged her figure and flowed like the river near the cottage. No veil, just a crown of baby's breath nestled into her curls. Her steps were measured, steady, every footfall a declaration that she had earned this moment, not by luck, but by survival. She met Emerson's eyes halfway down the aisle and smiled. He smiled back, eyes glassy, chest rising slower than usual, like he was trying not to fall apart before they reached the vows. Phoenix cleared his throat when they finally stood side by side. Ladies and gentlemen, though technically we're mostly just family and neighbors, we're gathered here not for spectacle but for story. He looked at Alina. At first, she thought she had to be perfect to be loved. Then at Emerson, and he thought he had to prove something to deserve her. He held up both hands, but here's what they figured out. Love doesn't come after you've arrived. It comes while you're becoming. And these two, they chose each other while becoming. When it came time for the vows, they didn't read from paper. Alina spoke first. "I came broken," she said, voice soft, "but you never made me feel incomplete. You never asked me to be fixed. You just stood close enough that I remembered I was still whole." She paused. "I don't promise perfection. I promise presence. I don't promise never to cry. I promise to let you hold me when I do, and I don't promise easy. I promise honest." Emerson cleared his throat. "I waited years," he began, voice shaking slightly, "but you were worth every second. I've built things, companies, towers, legacies, but nothing feels as solid as your hand in mine. I want every breakfast, every mess, every midnight story. Not because they're perfect, but because they're ours." Phoenix didn't wait for a dramatic pause. He just smiled and said, "You may now begin forever." When Emerson kissed her, it wasn't fireworks or frenzy. It was home. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and lanterns swayed from oak branches, Selah and Eden raced through the grass, trailing ribbons from their flower girl baskets. Lydia danced barefoot with Phoenix, laughing louder than anyone else. Emerson's mother, distant for years but present now, sat quietly at a corner table, watching everything unfold through eyes that held quiet repentance. She had come without pride, but with a letter in hand, a letter Alina would read later, alone, and cry over not because it hurt, but because it healed. In the final hour, Alina sat on a bench beneath the tree line, her head resting on Emerson's shoulder, his hand wrapped around hers. "I still feel afraid sometimes," she whispered. He kissed her forehead. "That's okay," he said. "You don't have to be fearless." She looked up. "Then what do I have to be?" He smiled. "Just free," and she was. Finally. And just like that, a woman who was once thrown away became the center of a love story stronger than any title, inheritance, or last name could offer. Not because everything went perfectly, but because she chose to rise anyway. Because she learned that her worth was never tied to approval. It was tied to love, to truth, to the tiny hands of two girls who saw her not as broken, but as their whole world, and to a man who didn't save her, but stood beside her while she saved herself. What does happily ever after really mean? Is it castles and vows, or is it choosing someone over and over again, even after they've seen the ugliest parts of you? For Alina and Emerson, it meant starting over without shame. It meant watching two little girls go from surviving to laughing again. And maybe that's the kind of love we all need to believe in. The kind that doesn't need to be loud, to be real. Now let me ask you, our amazing viewers, have you ever been in a situation where you were wrongly judged, cast aside for something you didn't do, and still found the strength to move forward? Maybe you've been like Alina, forced to start again from nothing. Maybe you've been like Emerson, living with the weight of what if until you finally got the chance to make it right. Whatever your story is, this channel, Love and Twilights, is a space to celebrate those kinds of moments. Moments that remind us that pain can become purpose, that endings aren't always the end, and that sometimes what feels like rejection is actually redirection to something more beautiful than you imagined. If this story touched your heart, here's what you can do to help it reach someone else who needs it too. Hit the like button, because when you do, you tell YouTube this is the kind of meaningful content worth showing the world. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story that blends romance, resilience, and real-life emotion. Turn on the notification bell so you're the first to know when a new love and life journey is released. Share this video with a friend, a sister, or someone who's going through a hard time. Remind them they're not alone. And most importantly, comment below. We want to hear from you. What did Selah and Eden teach you about innocence and hope? Have you ever walked away from a love only to find it waiting for you again later? Your stories inspire us. Your voice matters here. Now before you go, here's a gentle reminder. In this life, you will meet people who try to define you by your mistakes, your scars, your silence. Let them talk, because the right people, the ones who matter, will love you not despite your past, but because you survived it. And to anyone watching this right now who feels invisible, unwanted, or unworthy, we want you to know, here on Love in Twilight, we don't just tell stories, we remind you that healing is possible, that love, real love, can come after chaos, and that a second chance isn't a fantasy, it's a choice. And sometimes the ones who truly love you aren't the ones who show up with flowers, they're the ones who stay. Through the storm, through the silence, and still call you home. Until next time, from all of us here, take care of your heart, cherish your peace, and never ever stop believing in the kind of love that finds you, even after the world turns its back. We love you, and we'll see you in the next story.